You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. Hello, welcome to Garibaldi Red, Nottingham Forest podcast, Nottinghamshire Live. My name is Matt Davies, and the sun is out and everyone should be happy with an extra spring in their step because Nottingham Forest have won their first game of the season, a very handy 2-0 win at Huddersfield under the guidance of caretaker manager Stephen Reid. And here to discuss that and everything that's going on with the managerial situation, first of all, is former Reds player and Sky Sports presenter David Prutton. Hello, Pruts, you well?
I'm very well, Matt. How are you? I'm very much looking forward to this. And our very special guest, I'm sure, is absolutely skipping. And as you say, the sun's shining and it'll be the playoffs next, won't it? So, go on.
Well, yeah. I mean, Greg Mitchell is the most optimistic Forest fan. Even last week, even on Thursday, he said we're only 15 points off top spot. So I dread to think what he's going to say now after one win. But yeah, Greg Mitchell's with us from Forest Garibaldi. Greg, you well?
Yeah, booking my playoff hotel.
Good. So, yeah, I mean, you were there at Huddersfield, Greg. Talk us through what it was like to actually see Nottingham Forest win a game on the road and play well and everyone leave the ground happy. What was that like?
It just makes such a difference, doesn't it? All weekend I've been on a high. Even went out this morning, did some exercise, just bouncing, really. It was the perfect day. We got the 2-0. We didn't sit back, and then we protected it. It was. I thought it was a perfect performance. Whether it's because it has been so poor recently, we just looked so energised. Johnson is just frighteningly. He showed why teams want him. I thought he was superb. Joe Lolly was brilliant. The fullbacks, great. Graben just took his goal so well. It's exactly what you want a striker to do, and it was just a really good performance. Brilliant away day. The crowd was superb. It just, it's been about 20 months since we've seen them win a game in the league, and it showed. It really did. I mean, even though Huddersfield didn't show a lot, 92nd minute, I was still nervous looking at the clock, counting down the seconds. And yeah, it just reminded you why you do it, really.
How much credit, Prots, do you give Stephen Reid? It's a difficult situation, isn't it? He's obviously Houston's man in a sense, but he's gone in, he's made a big decision to go back to Brice Samba after he was dropped. He's changed formation to 3-4-3. He could have fallen flat on his face there, but it's come out smelling of roses. How much credit do you give him?
Yeah, it's fantastic to know that he has been malleable enough to change what the situation, the formation has been. Greg's absolutely right. It's a Forest side that look for quite a while to just be settling in games, very mindful of not surrendering a lead or a point that they may have garnered during the course of 90+ minutes, and then actively going out to win a game, which sounds tremendously commonsensical, and it's in no way kind of disparaging of how Chris approached the football match, because he's very, very cautious. But I think what you've seen in that particular game, and what we've seen over the course of the last few months with Forest, is a marked difference. I still, without wanting to sound like an old ex-pro, even though I am an old ex-pro, and having been in that situation where sometimes just a change of atmosphere can inspire the players, it was almost woefully predictable that they would go to someone like Huddersfield, who've been doing very, very well, and come away with a win, wasn't it? Which, like I said, this hopefully we'll have a little touch on Chris, won't we? And then moving forward and see where we're at with regards to our general opinion on Forest. But to signal a note of cynicism for a little bit, it's a good set of players that haven't been playing very well at all. And as much as they might frame it in the sense of a manager wanting them to play a certain way, it's not an under 15s team. If you want to go and express yourselves, I'm not saying fly in the face of what the manager asks for, but from what Greg's saying there, you've got good players doing what they're best at. That's a professional footballer's job. So Chris Hughton, as we well know, has paid the price for it. But the positive aspect that you take from it is that performance is in there, and it should have been there before.
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick up on that then, because Chris Sutton was on BT Score or whatever it's called at the weekend, and he said shame.
He must have been very low key. I bet he never said anything at all.
Well, no, exactly.
To anybody.
He said shame on the players. They should have done this when the manager was here. Kind of overlooking the change in formation and the change. I mean, they pressed the ball as far as I could see, Greg. They never pressed the ball under Hughes, and they did that on Saturday. So I don't give much credence to that. But you've been in dressing rooms, then, Prots. I mean, do you give a bit more credence to what Chris is saying there, that players can just not quite down tools, but just lose faith in a manager and then regain it.
Possibly, and the thing is as well, because of what we're talking about with Chris, we're not talking about a manager that really kind of divides opinion in a dramatic way, are we? He's not known for falling out with players. He's not known for having big busts up. He's not known for dividing dressing rooms. I was reading an article with Harry Arter, whose treatment was quite surprising, I thought, coming back later from pre-season, very much moved away from what the first team was. I thought that maybe that wasn't so. Maybe I'm being naive. I didn't assume that would be the way that Chris Hughton would go about his work with professional footballers. But maybe that's a very small case in point. But if it was someone that was known to be slightly combustible, that could really kind of very much put the cat amongst the pigeons when it came to dealing with people, then I could understand that. But I think, as you say, if you get a sweeping generalisation from Chris Sutton, who, with the greatest respect, probably does more Premier League football, doesn't he, than kind of Nottingham Forest and the Championship. So it's very easy to say that's how it happened and that's what the players have done. But I'm sure Greg will be able to tell us exactly off the back of what he'd seen at Huddersfield. If there's a team with the spring in its step, which goes actively hunting to go and win games, getting on the front foot, pressing the opposition, not giving them a moment's peace, and being able to attack in the way that they attacked with that change in formation, then all credit to Stephen Reid. Stephen Reid's seen these players firsthand for quite a long period of time, hasn't he? And maybe, as every good assistant is, yes, he's totally loyal to the man that he is working for, but he should have his own thought process, should have his own ideas and ways of setting up a team. He's been given the chance. He's done that. He's been asked to do that. And that's the perfect answer.
Did it feel, Greg, like almost a sense of they should have done this a couple of games earlier? And I'm being hypocritical here because we said after the transfer window, you've got to give Hughton a bit of time with these players that have been signed. Not by him, I don't think. But it just, obviously, it was not working against Cardiff and Middlesbrough. Do you kind of have that sense of what might have been if they'd pulled the trigger a little bit sooner? Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? If they'd have known what was to come, they'd have got rid of him after game one. But yeah, they should have done it earlier, but thankfully they have done it now. And, you know, those 3 points might not have come under Chris Hughton, unfortunately. But on what Prutz was saying about the pressing, and we were constantly, when Huddersfield started to really put pressure on us with 20 odd minutes to go, there was always two of our players trying to get that ball back off them. And I was thinking, oh gosh, here we go, like the time wasting's going to start now and they're going to give 8 or 9 minutes injury time. But it never happened. And I think the ref only gave 4 minutes. And that just really showed how well we played and how well we protected the lead without really having to go to those, you know, you can't swear on here, can you? But what Sambi usually does, his nickname he likes for himself. But we just didn't need to do that. And Chris Sutton, I just thought it was a little bit lazy of him. He possibly, I'd hazard a guess, didn't even watch the game, and it was just a generalisation. I think he did it to us last time we lost a manager. It's easy to say, isn't it? But I think if he'd have watched that game, he'd have had a much different opinion. And there were clear changes, and there was, and this is annoying that the players did play so differently individually, but it's happened. And, you know, just as long as they keep playing like that, and we might yet get our new manager bounce on Saturday yet again. So,
Greg, can I sorry to interrupt, can I just ask you a question purely from my interest in what the fans have to think? We had a band of fans, didn't we, singing about Chris losing his job in the Borough game. We've seen a lot of pessimism and cynicism in the way that he's the results that he's kind of garnered over about a year or so in the job, which, I mean, at Championship level, sadly nowadays, nearing on a year in a job is pretty decent. That's the scary thing. But your take on it and how you see that, the smile on your face suggests that this is a bright new start. And almost, do those players have a slate that's wiped clean, or do they owe you something?
I think they owed us that performance on Saturday. They absolutely owed us that performance. But it's just amazing how different the win is. There's been none of this talk about what's going on behind the scenes. There's been nothing since Saturday, and it's so refreshing. And it just shows a football club that wins games, you kind of ignore everything else that's going on. I haven't enjoyed the last few weeks. You've waited 18 months to get back in the stadium, and it has been toxic. I've never known it as bad as this. through the Fawaz era and everything that went on, like the fans just seemed so angry. And I think it was a lot of, pent up anger of we've waited so long for this and this is what's being delivered. I didn't agree with some of the chanting. Even on Saturday, we're 2-0 up, we're playing so well, and people are singing like, how rubbish must you be? We're winning away. And I thought, come on, you're like jabbing fun at your own team here. We're playing brilliant against Huddersfield, that were one of the form teams in the Championship. And I think we win again on Saturday, and all this is nicely forgotten, and we've got the new CEO in place. I am a positive person when it comes to Forest, but I have got a lot more optimism now, a shed loads more optimism.
I wanted to put your playing hat on again, perhaps briefly. Have you been in a dressing room where the manager is very conservative and the football does it feel stifling as a dressing room? Does it bring you down if you want to be let loose a bit or not?
I think it depends where the club that you're at that moment in time is. In a league sense, I've played that in teams that had expectation on them. You take the Forest side with the younger players in that we had a very long time ago when Paul Hart took over, off the back of obviously David Platt and Steve Wigley being in charge, which missed out on the playoffs. And I remember Wiggs being very kind of vocal in the sense of falling short and we should have done better. Then obviously when Paul took the lads into the playoffs and the way that they played, I think there was a real fondness between the fans and the players for how that type of team played in quite a fearless way. And I'm thinking about moving forward. The Southampton side that I was in was very much boxing clever under Gordon Strachan. He had players that could express themselves. He had a lot of foot soldiers that were very fit and were in a position to kind of navigate themselves through games. I'm just as we were discussing this earlier and thinking back. I mean, I was, and Greg probably would agree with this, and you will too, Matt, having seen me play, that more often than not, I was in teams that weren't trying to lose, actually chasing too many people down, trying to play the beautiful game. But I think there was always space for the better players, the more expressive players, to go and do what they could possibly do. Nothing was. There was a structure. The best coaches and managers you play for always gave you a structure. But any formation, any setup is something to play from. And all of that, whether it's a 3-4-3, whether it's 3-5-2, how often can we? If you look at people looking at a 3-5-2, going, well, that could quite easily be a back five. Yeah, but it could also be like half the team bombing forward to attack the opposition. So it's all open to interpretation. I just think, Greg's mentioned about a stereotype coming from a pundit that's probably operating on a different league and different matches, but that side of what Chris's tenure is going to be taken as Nottingham Forest. I hope it's not just, he came in, stopped the rot for a little bit and then we got bored of him and moved him on, because I think a lot of the stuff that he did, taking over from Sabri, solidifying a team that was shipping goals, was very, very good. I think that combination of Joe Lolly and Matty Cash was tremendous, but then Matty gets the chance to move on to the Premier League and you say, well done, go on, crack on, you've done an amazing job. So there's always little bits that go into it, but as ever, the manager takes the brunt of it, and that's I'm sure Chris is frustrated, but the man that I've spoken to knows exactly what the nature of the beast is, and let's be honest, without sounding too cynical, he's probably got a pat on the back and there you go, mate, here's a bit of money in your bank account, not that you possibly need it, but that'll soften the blow. And again, sorry for sounding cynical, but it's all part and parcel of this circle, this cycle of what football management is.
True. I think there might be a few managers who have still got a bit of cash coming in from Forest over the last few years. I want to, touch on a couple of individuals. Start with Graben, Greg. I mean, he seemed to benefit from the formation. He wasn't having it lumped up to him all the time, and he scored a very good goal. That's 2 in 3 now. Do you kind of hope, he's been a bit written off by people on here and, pundits saying Forest never signed a striker, Forest never signed a striker, me included. Does he have a bit of a chip on his shoulder now, and does that get him going, hopefully? Yeah,
and linking up with Johnson the way that he did for the goal, like more of that to come, surely. And Lolly, there's so many people in that midfield that are going to benefit Graben if they are given more chances to express themselves and play properly. So, yeah, Graben's a great striker. What is he, 34, 35 or something? He's not got many years left at a very high level, you'd imagine. But if we can get 1 or 2 more seasons of him playing like he did on Saturday, then he's going to get the goals. He's going to get 15, 20 goals. You never know if we're playing well. It isn't all on him. And I've been frustrated with him recently. I've been saying that, strikers shouldn't be the captain when we've got players like Worrell and McKenna in there that can really captain from the back. But what do I know, really? He played.
I think you're right, Greg. Always odd having a striker or a goalie as a captain. I mean, that might sound so old-fashioned. It's untrue, but I was always kind of scratching my head with that. With whether it's a team that I was playing in or not, you kind of thought, just doesn't look right, does it?
What do you think? Go on, Greg. Sorry, you go on.
No, well, just following on from that, really, that he proved on Saturday that he can do both. I still wouldn't want to see it, but he's a proven goal scorer, and give him the chances, and he's going to score, because that was the perfect cross from Johnson. They're not always going to be that good, and he's got to be there ready to get him in. And I think he's going to be playing whilst he's fit every single game now.
Yeah. I find him an interesting character psychologically. I don't know him. I've only interviewed him a couple of times, but I always get the impression he wants to have the weight on him, the weight of expectation. He kind of thrives on it. He wants to be the man, and maybe he quite likes being written off just to prove people wrong. What do you make of him, Prutz? Has he still got a lot of juice left in the tank or not?
Yeah, I think Greg's absolutely right. There's not much that Greg said so far that I disagree with. Whether that makes his opinion, I don't know. Depends what the Forest fans' feedback is. He might get completely ostracised when he next goes to the City ground. You've been agreeing with him, but no, I think you're right. Whenever you look at a striker and his impact on the pitch, he's at the mercy of how he's surfaced on a football pitch, isn't he? He's at the mercy of being able to convert chances that are put into his path, and the quality of the balls in across the board haven't really been that good. The service into him hasn't really been that good. But on the flip side of it is, if you're not having a game where anything's coming your way, you work your socks off down all across the front. You give the opposition not a moment's rest. But then on the flip side, again, so many flip sides with this, that if it is a team that's sitting back, then as a striker, you're not going to go chasing, because you end up running around on your own. And you turn around, there's 15 yards behind you. The rest of the team are kind of just waving on, going, "This is brilliant what you're doing," but no one's helping you. So it's I think he does operate under that sense of wanting to prove people wrong. It's funny what motivates players and strikers and what gets the best out of them. But if that's what happens with Lewis, and let's be honest, at this level, his goal scoring feats have been phenomenal. Really, I mean, you're trying to look at in this level and below, and the second tier of English football. We had Sheffield United on Saturday, and Billy Sharp was there. So Billy's done wonders in the EFL and done wonders in the Championship since the turn of the century. Ricky Lambert was another one. But you're looking at Lewis up there with some of the highest scorers, Jordan Rhodes in the second tier, this side of this century. So they've got a player there that can score goals and know where the net is, as long as you give him an opportunities, and that becomes a team responsibility, not just the striker.
I suppose two of the people that are key to that are Lolly and Johnson, and obviously Myton as well. But Lolly and Johnson stood out on Saturday, didn't they, Greg? How good is it to see Lolly back to not his best, but looking more like his best, certainly.
Yeah, he's just one of them players that I don't think he's the quickest, is he? He's nowhere near as quick as Johnson, but the balls he plays, and he can have 2 or 3 players around him and still come out with the ball. And he is that kind of player that when he's firing, when he's playing well, he could do anything, whether it's passing or scoring from 20-odd yards. So Lolly being fit, healthy and in form is key to the success of our team this season, definitely. And Johnson's just pardon?
He needs a foil, doesn't he, Lolly, I always think. So it was Matty Cash who would overlap and free a yard of space, and he hasn't had that for a while. Cyrus Christie did it a bit, but could Jed Spence do that, Greg? Could he pile on and make some space for him?
Yeah, I mean, Spence was excellent, and I loved it. Was he subbed with Johnson? Was it Spence?
Remember.
I think. And I think it was, and then he had to, the new thing where they get subbed and have to go straight off the pitch, and he
did came off the same time as Brennan, yeah.
Yeah, and he walked around, and one of the Huddersfield fans must have given him some jip, and it was right next to the away end. So he did no more than just stood in front of the away end, giving him that. And that's what they need the last 15. You know, the real G'd us up, and I really enjoy. And like I say, I enjoy the right and left back. I think they're excellent additions, and you know, credit to Chris Hughton for those. You
see lots and lots of Championship football, Pruts. Where does Johnson and Lolly rank potentially, not on what they've done so far, though Brennan's been really good, but potentially where could they be in terms of a pair of Championship forwards or wingers?
Well, I mean, with and again going back to how they play and how good the teammates are that they're playing with, that's a top 10, if not a top 6 pair of players that can create chances. We know what Joe can do. I think the great thing with Joe as well, having heard him speak about not just being a professional footballer, but being at Forest, he gets it. He gets the responsibility. He gets what it means to the people that support the club that he's playing for. And Brennan, not just because I know his dad very, very well, and he was a former teammate of mine, David. I think the way that he plays football is fantastic. I think the interest that he's attracting is a double-edged sword, isn't it, for Forest? As long as he's playing well, it's great. If suddenly in January he then becomes a Premier League footballer, then it's slightly different. But again, I think we all know, particularly off the back of the pandemic, where football finances do stand, which will quite obviously come on to in due course with the other lot down the road. But I think, as you say, it's imperative that to get the best out of players, you have the best teammates around them. And if that's Jed Spence doing a passable impression of what Matty Cash could do with Joe Lolly, then fantastic, I think, for Forest. And also with Max Lowe and what Brennan can bring to that side of the pitch. I think it's there's a lot, and we spoke about this earlier on in the season, I think, Matt, that you look at the team on paper, which is almost a redundant comment, isn't it, when it comes to talking about football teams, because anyone can look fantastic on paper, but common consensus is that's a Forest starting 11, 18-man squad that shouldn't be anywhere near where it's been. Shouldn't, you know what I mean? Regardless of how a manager set them up, how a manager wants them to go about playing Championship football matches, it's nowhere near that. And I think, given how close they were to getting into the playoffs the season before last, playing the way that they did with the players that they had, then I'm not saying playoffs now should be the absolute bare minimum. I'm not, because there's still a hell of a long way to go. But you look at what Sunderland did with Roy Keane coming in, similar positions, went on a run which got them all the way up and into the Premier League. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. But what it's going to take, and I'm going to make this sound so very, very straightforward, is their best players playing as best as they possibly can, more consistently than not. Therein lies how you crack football in a nutshell, which sounds so easy when you've sat here on your kitchen table with absolutely zero pressure on your shoulders.
That's Greg Mitchell levels of optimism now. I like that.
It's sucking me in. It's really that smile. It's killing me.
Last thing on the game, Greg. How did the back three look? And Figueiredo, I suppose, particularly. He's almost been written off by Forest fans a few times, and then he's come back in again. Did it work, the three at the back?
Clean sheet, yeah, definitely worked. And they were trying. I think McKenna cramped up, and they weren't time. It was genuine, and they all looked shattered at the end. They were delighted, but they were shattered. So yeah, it worked. Whether it'll work every game, and like I said earlier, Huddersfield I think they were pretty much the form team in the league. You don't go to the form team, play that openly, and win 2-0. And spoke to some of their fans walking out, and they were never in it. The only negative thing they had to say about us was our third kit, but it worked for us, didn't it? The players could obviously see each other.
Yeah, you could see the stewards as well. Yeah. Let's talk about going forwards then. I mean, all this is contingent on who the next manager is, and all indications are it's going to be Steve Cooper, although I suppose until it's announced and the contracts are all dotted, you just don't know, as we've seen with a few managerial search over the summer. But if it is Cooper, what would you make of that? Perhaps he had a very good track record at Swansea, didn't he?
Yeah, he was superb. I had a good long chat with him just a couple of 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, because very conscious of the fact that his Swansea side and what he did was not remembered in the right way, because that kind of leans towards a manager thinking about his legacy when it's absolutely not. He's kind of very, very reassuringly and refreshingly ego-free as Steve. Just enjoys what the actual brass tacks of the job is, which is getting out on the pitch with players and improving players, building relationships with younger players, with older players, being able to employ his fundamentals and being given the tools to do so. Coming out of Swansea, from the outside looking in, I think he was expected to go again with even less resources that he'd had from the previous 2 seasons, which when suddenly top 6 becomes your bare minimum and you are losing your better players, I think it then becomes a really tough job, not just a tough job, but a really tough job. And I think he came out, he felt at the right time with his stock high, which then means that now he's in the discussion with regards to being the Forest head coach. I think that would possibly be. I thought Chris Wilder was another great shout. I thought what he did, working at all levels of football, there was something slightly kind of in one kind of press, not release, but wave of interviews where it was suggested that he wouldn't fancy a Nottingham Forest in the position that they're in. That's, I mean, I can categorically say that would be total rubbish. He's one of the most authentic, driven, ambitious men and managers I've ever come across. And regardless of the fact that he's managed in the Premier League and done wonders getting Sheffield United from League One into the Premier League, I think between him and Steve Cooper, whichever manager or head coach Forest end up with, out of those 2 choices, I think they're the 2 stellar choices out there at this moment in time. Obviously, if you start looking in the realms of paying a hell of a lot of compensation to lure someone from another club that may be doing better, that's a slightly hypothetical conversation, because that it involves so many kind of variables. But of the 2 men that are available, I think if you're a Forest fan, and again, I'll ask Greg this in just a second, that you got to look at those 2 and be rubbing your hands together, thinking, wow, this next 6, 7, 8 months could be very, very exciting indeed.
Can I ask Greg your question?
Greg, what do you think about those 2 as people that could lead Forest?
Yeah, well, before any of the odds came out or any of the rumours, it was Chris Wilder for me, and I genuinely didn't think we'd have a chance of getting him. And then, you know, I think Matt did a story on him, and Rio Ferdinand's there retweeting it, saying he is interested. This is true. So it just shows that we have still got that pull to get managers of that calibre wanting to come and work for us. And, you know, the Cooper, I'd love Cooper. I'd love him to be announced today and have the week to get ready for Millwall. I'd love that. But these things, football's strange, isn't it? We've definitely got our man. We've 100% got him. Then it doesn't happen. And God, if Wilder's the next man to knock on the door saying, I'll take it, I'd be delighted.
Yeah. I mean, Cooper, it sounds like from speaking to a couple of people, like Prutton said, he was expected to go again with fewer players, and back in January he wanted an extra striker to get them over the line, he thought. So if that backing wasn't there, I think that's why he reached the end of the road with Swansea and nothing more. And on Wilder, there's this kind of, it's a bit of, I think it's a red herring if you believe the people close to him that he wouldn't work in Forest structure. I was told he would have worked under Dane Murphy, and that thing about Sheffield United was a bit of a red herring. But if it is Cooper, a Forest fan's a bit cheeky here. Some are turning their nose up at a bloke who's taken them to the playoffs twice in a row, saying, "Oh, the football's not so good." And we'll come on to that because I think that might be a red herring. But a Forest fan's been a bit cheeky there, Greg, or not?
Yeah. The best one I saw was someone had gone into this blooming XG rabbit hole, saying, "Oh yeah, but XG has less chances." It's like, what even is that? So it's just, it's like we need to be miserable as Forest fans, and then suddenly we get this manager, and it's like, how can we put a downer on it? And we can't be like that anymore. We've got this fresh new start. The key is the fresh new CEO. With this January, it's going to be his ideas and his transfer window. Definitely worried about losing one of, Johnson or Worrell still. But a new manager like Cooper, if he's sitting down with our CEO, I think he's going to be desperate to come to this club. You'd hope he would be anyway. And he'd had success with Swansea. And people were saying, "Oh, it wasn't youngsters, it was these, multi-million-pound players." It wasn't really. There was a couple of really good players, but I did think they punched. And everything you read about him playing with the youngsters, we've got one of the best academies in the league. It's just a really good fit.
I mean, there's this thing that he's another 4-2-3-1 merchant, but from what I've been looking at, he actually plays 3-4-1-2. Although perhaps you think I make too much of formations. Anyway,
but the thing is with this, it's. And I understand it. Like I said, trying to put my feet, myself in the shoes of a Forest fan and seeing what they might possibly expect or want from Steve Cooper. He was 90 minutes away from getting a team with a hell of a lot of their better players that had gone. I can't quite remember where the budget fit in the Championship. Obviously, you had Ayew up top, and the great thing about that was, he's had Champions League experience. He's played in the World Cup. Almost like he's doing Swansea a favour, sticking around and leading these young lads. Yeah, but if you're on the ballpark figure between £50,000 and £80,000 a week, well done. I mean, again, the cynic in me comes out. Of course, he's staying around. Is he going to get there anywhere else? Possibly not. Like I said, that's not an exact figure that I plucked out of the air. That's kind of maybe a bit of hearsay with regards to the structure of his contract there at Swans. But you can't doubt how well he played. You can't doubt how well Steve got something out of him. If he's so good with younger players, he's also proven himself with someone that potentially could have been a tough one to buy into what he wanted to do. And he also, as I said, Forest missed out on the playoffs, obviously ironically, that goal swing with Swansea a couple of years ago. But he's still Steve Cooper's still got a side closer to the Premier League than anybody has for Nottingham Forest in the last 20 years. Would that be correct in saying so? I mean, they've not been anywhere near.
No, they've not been to a final, have they?
No. So to do that, to get to a semi-final and then be beaten by Brentford, then to go again and get a game closer with arguably a team that a squad that probably had less of his good players than it did do the year before. I think it's. I understand the passion. I understand the thought process. With you want the absolute best for your football team. You want the absolute best X, Y, and Z. But for a team that's been nowhere near banging back on the door of the Premier League, to get a little bit. Snob is not the word, is it? To be a little bit nonplussed when it comes to a player to a manager that in very recent memory has got so very, very close. I just think staggers me a little bit. And I'm not saying that everyone's got to be liked and every manager that comes to the door has got to be universally liked, because that is obviously not the case. Same with players. But I mean, give the man half a chance before he's even stepped on the training ground, before he's even signed up. He's done more than managers in the recent past have done to get Forest to get a team near the Premier League than anyone at Forest has. So why not give him the chance?
I've only interviewed him once when he was working with England under 17s.
And he's won the World Cup. So I mean,
well,
again,
yeah.
What do we need anything else to tick the boxes with?
Well, exactly. When I interviewed him, he seemed very considered, very thoughtful, not a ranter and a raver. And you've obviously known him better than me, Prutz. I mean, is that the way management's gone now? The days of Joe Kinnear and Gary Megson screaming in your ears at half time for what I can see is absolutely no point at all, and just must be water for ducks back after a couple of times.
I mean, the great thing, and I will always be eternally grateful to Gary Megson for allowing me to play, and sorry Forest fans, but for playing when it's funny when we're talking about a specific club, then you mention other what would be deemed big clubs as well. Sheffield Wednesday being the club that I'm going to refer to doesn't mean to say that. Yeah, you just love them all in different ways, don't you? I knew what he was like because I played against his teams and kind of been not aghast, but been kind of playing on that side of the pitch, kind of spend half the time thinking, is he what? Is he shouting at me? He's shouting at his own player like that. That's amazing. And having had it firsthand Wednesday, I can say from firsthand experience that yes, being called certain things that would normally shock you in the street all the time, it does then you do get used to it. I think at one point I thought that was my nickname, but I won't go into what it was. And a lot of people might agree with that. But it was. I think it has changed. We did a Swansea game earlier on in the season, so we had the chance to sit pitch side, which was fantastic. And Russell Martin, who a manager that I've got a lot of time for, and someone that I've had several very, very in-depth conversations with, and found him a fascinating manager. But everything was positive. Even a couple of times, maybe I'm being a bit harsh on the goalkeeper there. He took it out, turned out onto his right foot and sprayed it about 3 or 4 foot over the full back's head, which in years gone by would have got Paul Hart out the dugout, shouting, either Roach or whoever it was, what on earth are you doing? Why have you kicked out of play? And obviously, sorry, Gaffer, I didn't mean to, but it is a different way of doing it. Steve builds relationships, whether it's with Ryan Brewster, who I know that he still touches base with from time to time, who's gone from being a bit part player at Liverpool to being a big part for Swansea to being a 20 million plus pound striker that's played in the Premier League. He fosters relationships. He tries to get the best out of not just the player but the person. And I'm not saying that he's reinventing the wheel with that, but I think he is very much of a new wave of coaches that does understand that. And you don't get success with an adolescent side like the under-17s to conquer the world without being able to buy into what makes a footballer tick. And as I said, if I was a Forest fan, I'd be... we're preempting him signing on the dotted line here, but I'd be excited to see what he could do with a team. Yes, we've mentioned Chris and how he set the team up, but a team that as individuals and collectively has been woefully underperforming for a long period of time. True.
I'd take Ryan Brewster if he became available from Sheffield United.
Again, he's got to get himself back up in the goals, hasn't he? Ryan, he's a very comes across as a very nice kid, and I saw him on Saturday against Hull City, and he's working his way back towards what he can do. But I suppose I think from Forest's point of view, you'd like to think that he wouldn't come to us because we are now a rival rather than someone that's seen as the whipping boys in the Championship.
True. Greg, how old are you?
36.
Okay.
I think then I'm at that age where you have to start thinking about it.
You're looking 36, aren't you?
Yeah, you're a little bit younger than me, and you're definitely a bit younger than Proz. Although I'm almost the same age as you, Proz. I was thinking about that Paul Hart team. Did you watch them when Darren Ward used to?
I loved it.
Get the ball and ping it out to the fullbacks and take
it on the ball, Wardy, wasn't he? Very good.
I think I look back at that, and there's that and the Billy Davies era, of course, that was our most promising teams. It was so exciting, especially Harty again, fostering youngsters. How important that is for a club like us, and he possibly set it all going, really. So forever grateful for what he did, really.
True. Nick Marshall was on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, Prot.
Was he? How is he?
He's very well. He's Liverpool's assistant academy manager, so he's doing all right for himself.
So he's laughing his head off. So he's
fascinating man.
He is absolutely. And the dynamics of you had Paul Hart, you had Wiggs as his number 2, didn't you? Before Wiggs kind of progressed up into the first team with David Platt, and Andy Beasley was there as well. Charlie McParlin, as we know, that eternal ray of sunshine when it comes to all things football based in Nottingham, bless him. And Nick was obviously he had the audacity to have gone to university, I think, which in the footballing realms was seen as, who does he think he is? What, because he's had further education? Who thinks he knows everything? And bless him, he had to... Yeah, he had to assert himself. He had to really kind of stand his ground in this this is probably just at the time, maybe 5 years hence, that things were just starting to turn in a sense of, there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down of what was deemed acceptable back then and is very much not deemed acceptable now when it came to tough love, shall we say. But I think Nick would have been part of that, and I always enjoyed my time with him. Funny fella as well, sharp sense of humour, which possibly stuck in a few ex-footballers' craws because he was quite quick-witted. So he's obviously gone to is himself on Merseyside.
Yeah, no, he's doing all right for himself. Right, let's turn back to Forest present day and just finish on them. Next 5 fixtures, and again, we're going to be relentlessly optimistic and people say we're being stupid, but the next 5 games are Millwall, Barnsley, Birmingham, Blackpool and Bristol City. And I wouldn't have any of those teams necessarily in my top 6 come the end of the season. So, Greg, are you going to tell me that Forest are going to take 15 points from that, or what are you looking at?
It's a massive chance. I'd have loved those 5 games at the start of the season playing like we did after Saturday. They're teams that, even in the position we are, you think we've got to get something from this. Of course, we're not going to get 15 points, but Millwall's a massive test because they play ugly football usually, don't they? The stuff we seem to struggle against, like we did.
You're not playing away on Saturday, Greg. Very brave man. You know they're coming to your gaff. You're not heading down there.
But it's true. It's like a Neil Warnock style team with Middlesbrough. Like we really struggle to deal with them. But if we play to our strengths and the team now full of confidence and on a buzz from Saturday, start with a win against Millwall, and the mad thing is we still need a run to get out the relegation zone, and then we go from there, hopefully.
True. Yeah, Forest did themselves no favours against Cardiff and Middlesbrough the way they went about it at all. Where do you see Forest in the next few months? Obviously, we want them to climb the table. What's realistic?
Absolutely, it's a team that would, whatever. It shouldn't be propping up anything really in this division. It should be very much at least a top half side. Yeah, the thing is, you look at the teams that you've just mentioned there, Matt, and this is a reflection of what Forest have becoming over the last 20 years. They're very much, and with the greatest respect to the teams that we're talking about, they sound like championship fodder, don't they? And sadly, Forest do fit into that in a sense of, I could see them winning the majority of those games. I could see them getting turned over in the majority of those games. What the challenge is now is the optimism that Greg's talking about is to harness that, is to get people back to the City ground. And I was this is me not name dropping because I'm sure he'll probably disavow all knowledge of me texting him, but texting Johnny Owen with regards to what a new manager could possibly expect. And I've been there when things have been good. I've also been there when you're getting called quite choice things for acting like a bit of a wally and not finishing a football match, which we won't go into because we've done it many times on here, Matt. But that place, when it's full, when it's noisy, Greg will attest to that. It'd have been part of that wonderful noise that comes down from the stands. It's a phenomenal place to play football, and if there's a new wave of optimism that greets the players, but also that healthy hint of, come on, we're happy that you've got your fingers out, but we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. The thing that over the broader sense of what the championship season could possibly toss up is the quicker they get motoring out the bottom three, which, as we're probably going to come on to in just a second, is probably going to be narrowed down to a bottom two, isn't it? Forest shouldn't be anywhere near the knock-ins when it comes to this. They shouldn't get to January and think, oh, we just need to do enough work to make sure that it's not squeaky bum time. They should be rallying from now, looking at, if we're in a healthy situation come January, what does the manager need? What does the head coach need? Can we get a striker in from a Premier League side to give us 10 goals? A Ian Brewster, the effect that he had at Swansea, to nudge us towards a late push to somewhere. I think that's absolutely what their MO should be between now and January. Then after that, see where the rest of the season takes them.
We talk about a new wave of optimism and a bottom two. I mean, like we say, Derby County, Forest arch rivals, there's no optimism there at the moment. Greg, you're the big fan on the panel from Forza Garibaldi. How are you feeling about this? You want them to go under and go bust and see their fans crying into their cereal every morning, or what?
I said don't ask me because I'll start smiling, then I get told I'm horrible and nasty. I feel sorry for the staff, of course I do, but I have no sympathy for their fans. The way that they've acted over the last 4 or 5 years, they've got everyone on strings and Mel Morris doing this, that, the other. When we could all see what was going on, when you're not announcing your losses and this, that, the other, you could see it stunk. So, they wished for the way he treated the club, and now all of a sudden it's Mel Morris and the EFL. They should have seen it years ago and started protesting and doing stuff, but they didn't. So, yeah, I feel sorry for the staff that are clearly worrying and sleepless nights now, but they could save a hell of a lot of money by getting rid of someone like Rooney, how much he's on each week. So, yeah, not a lot of sympathy for the playing staff or the fans, unfortunately. But it's just sad when any business goes under. Of course it is. And, football needs to look at itself as a whole and say this has happened to them. It could happen to my team. It could easily happen next year. As fans, we've got to see the warning signs a lot earlier and start asking the hard questions.
True. Well, Forest have not incurred losses, that's not right. They've been a bit wasteful in the transfer market, certainly, as well. What's it do for the integrity of the competition, Prutz, if you've got a team in September or October, by the time it happens, that are on -12, -21, -20 whatever points? Does it harm the integrity of the championship, do you think?
I think that point becomes completely moot because of what Greg's saying there. It's operating in this way does bring sanctions. Luton, 30 points. Leeds United, 15 points. Potentially 24 with Derby. Now, you've got a man there who has been extremely successful from a business point of view, Mel Morris, and his financial commitment thus far as in the actual figures, is both staggering and really quite scary. The way that they've gone about it, the way that it's been directed, that's where the questions come into it, because it's chasing that holy grail of what the Premier League is, isn't it? Going at it, getting close on several occasions, but that kind of the law of diminishing returns that comes with that, with regards to how the last couple of seasons has gone, means that that John McGinn goal, the Villa goal, that's the sliding doors element of where they are, of what position they find themselves in now. And I think let's be honest, there's no good time to go into administration. There's no good time to have a points deduction. The fact that you've got two of them together, and just before we came on in, this is something that I read sadly in the Mail Online. So I don't know, obviously the kind of the deep dive into where this actually stands from a foundational point of view is open to interpretation, but it could be as much as 24 if they fail to pay players and staff on time. Is staggering, absolutely staggering, when it's a club that I'm sure other clubs were looking enviously on as they had an owner that was a fan and a man that was prepared to put his hand in his pocket. It's been a bit of it's not been a very widely discussed point, but I think I'd go as far as saying perhaps over the last decade or so in the Championship that you probably had Derby County, one of the biggest payers. I don't quite know the exact figures, but common consensus is that's what it's been, because they've always gambled on getting into the Premier League. When you don't, this is what happens. Like I said, Leeds United gambling to get into the Champions League every year. The minute it doesn't happen, you end up with wallies like me playing for them in League One with no points, no money, and no hope really. But that was a different set of circumstances altogether. But the way that Derby find themselves, and Greg's absolutely right, the people that pay for this are the people that are not remotely on a fraction of what any of the players are on. You get some poor sod in the ticket office or someone that's worked there for decades doing bits and pieces that is the first to be handed the P45, which I always think in these situations is horrendously sad and terrifically unfair. But the position that they found themselves in, to me, it can't have been suddenly someone tapping them on the shoulder saying, "Oh, by the way, have you seen the way that the club's run?" Going, "Whoa, what? I never saw that." This iceberg feels like it's been looming for quite a long period of time, and the quicker that it gets sorted out, the better. But there's no way at all, with the way that the EFL quite rightly sets up its institution, that these things are brushed under the carpet and points deductions are accrued, because that's how on earth. I'd say deter other teams, but we'll see it happen to another club because of the finances in football at this moment in time. But it's a shocking situation that they found themselves in. And I'm like Greg. I wonder. Wayne Rooney apparently found out, and I'm not plugging it because I work for them, found out on Sky Sports News they'd gone into administration. Said he'd not spoken to Mel Morris for several weeks. How on earth does that happen? Not a clue. Not a clue.
Go on, Greg. Sorry.
Yeah, the one thing as well I would say is, like, disregarding which team it is, the problem is teams like ourselves and Derby that always seem to be stuck together in the leagues, can't get rid of each other. We're fighting for that top six space with all the parachute payment clubs, these clubs that have come down with £150 million and I know they need it or they'll be in this situation, but you know, the effect it has lower down, like us trying to fight and get in this top six with the likes of your Norwiches, your West Broms, your Watfords, all these teams that have got £150 million and Premier League squads. It's just that the whole thing needs looking at. But that isn't the reason Derby are in this mess entirely. Of course it isn't. But for the next club it happens to, it's going to be a similar situation. It'll be one of those teams that hasn't got the parachute payments, gambles, it doesn't work. It did for Leeds 2 years ago, and I thought that's what we were doing. But to be honest, I think we're a lot more savvy than that. Touch wood.
Two questions to finish then. First to you, Prutz, then one for you, Greg. Would you scrap parachute payments, Prutz, or not?
That's something that Rick Parry's quite strong on, isn't he, at the EFL?
Or does that create another can of worms you're just opening off to the one you've just got rid of?
I don't know. It's something that, if, as Greg was saying as well, you look at the teams that came down last season, two of them went straight back up again. One got into the playoffs. So there is that disparity. But on the flip side of it is they've earned their place at the top table. Part of that top table is what they get for walking through the door and what they get with regards for how long they managed to stay there, which I think is right, because it's a phenomenal achievement for a club to get into the Premier League. Even more so now, it's so very, very tough. But I think I think you're quite right, Matt. Does scrapping it then just chuck up a whole other heap of debate and conjecture with regards to how financially the rest of the pyramid's structured? I honestly don't know. I honestly don't. I can see what it does for the competitive side of what the Championship is, and I hope that level of football, not just because we cover it a lot, remains as competitive as possible, that it allows teams to bounce up from League One into the Premier League, that we can still have that freedom of movement with teams playing out the skin and being better than perhaps they ever thought they were. But it's the financial state of what football is off the back of obviously the pandemic. And there was I think the Derby County statement alluded to that, and almost looking at the EFL to say that they hadn't been afforded the same chances as the rest of the EFL, but that's categorically not right. They had the same facilities were afforded to them, but you've got to meet certain criteria to get into this system of the financial aid, if you like, and that was afforded to all 72 league clubs. You know what I mean? And within that, the EFL just can't be going hell for leather. There's a great article in, I think it was The Athletic, where they were talking about that sense of why isn't the Premier League looking after everyone else? Premier League isn't, of the 20 clubs in the top division, aren't responsible for the way that Derby County go about spending money or putting money in, are they? And in one sense, they also, at one stage, and obviously we're talking about the early days of COVID when the world was a different place, and everyone was a bit more scattergun of the Premier League teams saying, yes, we want to help, but we shouldn't. Why are we bankrolling a team that then could get promoted, that then could send us down? And I could totally see where all of this was coming from, but I also could see the horrendous grey area from a financial point of view that sometimes football seems to be in. And we wait with bated breath to see what happens. And as Greg says, as much as Forest have been up and down and ownership has been questionable at times, I think the other side of it is because they've been a fair to middling Championship club, and I mean that with the greatest respect over the last few seasons. Yes, it could have been infinitely better, but having seen what's going down the other end of Brian Clough Way, it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, Forest have chased that rainbow themselves, Greg. They've been one of the bigger payers in the league. Are you happy now? As much as we'd love to see them spend, like Fulham have this window, are you quite happy that they've cut the wage bill and cut the average age of the squad and they're going a different direction? Is that putting you a bit more at ease for the future now?
Yeah, because I think it has been reported that he's putting £25 million a year in still, just to keep us at that level, £2.5 million a month, I think. But when you've got players like Harry Arter on mega wages who were nowhere near the squad, the sensible decisions have been made in recent weeks and months about things like that, and that has to continue. And it might be the case that we just have to look back and say it isn't going to happen this year. It might not happen next year, but we're going to build like these clubs do that get. Brentford are the perfect opportunity. I'm no big fan of Brentford. They do amazing, but
why do they do your in, Greg?
They were the ones who started shouting about this blooming XG stuff all the time and it drives me up the wall. But
Moneyball, mate, Moneyball.
Yeah, but he's done it perfectly, hasn't he? And that's why it worries me when Brentford are after a player like Brennan Johnson. They know exactly his worth. And when a team like them are after him, you think, right, we've really got to be careful with this one because they'll get him for the perfect amount of money and he'll go on and he'll do a Matty Cash and he'll then be worth 60 or 70 million. And we've been there with our 7 million we're going to get for him. So, yeah, I can't even remember the question now. It's Brentford.
I know, sorry. We found the one thing Greg hates, and bizarrely, it's Brentford.
I've got a good Brentford friend, but
that's. I mean, and you look at what they did, and again, you talk about teams going up against parachute payments. A team that got promoted without parachute payments, Leeds United, obviously, it's a slightly different size of club, but went up against clubs with parachute payments, got themselves promoted. It's the structure of what they've done, the way that they put that together. I'm knowing a little bit under the surface about how they've gone about it and the way they managed to recruit in the best possible way. Surely, I think as well, if you look at Sir Dane coming in, much mooted and much kind of vaunted with regards to what he could possibly do, then I'm intrigued to see what that does for Forest. I'm intrigued to see if doing something, because as we've seen in football, more often than not, teams and clubs do exactly the same thing with different personnel, don't they? They go, well, right, get someone else. So and it's funny how the perception of a manager or a new manager can cast a shadow on the other one. Mark Warburton had to work with the youth, and he had to develop younger players. He gets biffed. Aitor comes in, just give him what he wants. Brilliant. That's, you know what I mean? If he wants older players, let's get these older players in. And it moves on and it moves on. And whether you get Steve in charge, who wants to work with Dane, who can tell Dane this is exactly what I need, whether it's as they say nowadays, don't they? I'm after a 4, I'm after a 6, I'm after an 8. And I'm sat there going, can someone explain what these numbers are? Is it a midfielder? Is it a holder, attacking? Just tell me what you want. And if he can get that discourse, that discussion with Dane and his staff and use these statistics, then I don't know, maybe Greg, we'll have the same conversation in a year's time off the back of, I don't know, some team saying, Forest, who made it? Look what they've done.
I think I'm just bitter.
All these good players together, look where they are now.
Right, that's a good note to end it on. Let's hope Forest are in that position in a year's time. Thanks to everyone who watched along as normal or listened along. Do please give us a good rating or a good review, because it puts this podcast in people's feeds and makes more people watch and listen. And do subscribe, because that helps as well. Prutz, thank you very much as ever.
My pleasure. This has been tremendous, and I like the fact the sun's shining, not only literally but figuratively, on all things Forest. Absolutely right. Greg, thank you as well.
Cheers. What a difference a week, mate.
Exactly. And we'll be back this time next week when hopefully there's a manager in place, they've beaten Millwall, and Greg's talking about winning the league. Right. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll catch you soon.
Thank you for listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please let us know. We love hearing your feedback. We'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for listening.